Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here on WFAA Streaming. My name is Marisa Pedro. We appreciate you tuning in with us on a weekend that has been filled with a lot of emotion and a lot of activity here in North Texas. We are covering the protests and demonstrations that have been happening in various cities following the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis and the outcry that has come from it. I'm joined on this feed by our Tanya Iser, who is on the line. Tanya, say hello.
Hey, Maria. It's good to join you tonight.
I know. We wish we weren't here for all of these emotional and troubling reasons, but we're glad to have Tanya here because her expertise as far as covering the police force for so many years is something we're going to tap into as we show you some of the scenes across North Texas tonight. What you're looking at right now is our helicopter over Fort Worth. This is the West 7th Bridge, and you can see here a line of police there at the bottom of your screen and some demonstrators at the top. Tanya, I know you got a little bit more information about this scene, so can you walk us through what we're looking at here?
Well, I called Lance Conrad. He's one of our producers over in Fort Worth because I wanted to understand exactly what this is. This is the West 7th Bridge that's going to lead you into that sort of that cultural district, the police memorials down there. Just a lot of things are down there, and you can tell that the police have that you see that line of bike officers. Mm-hmm. They are obviously preventing those protesters from moving forward. And then behind them are what appear to be SWAT team or tactical team type officers. I actually covered the protest on Friday, mm-hmm. and this is a clear escalation because in terms of police response, because on Friday when I was out there, when I covered the protest in Fort Worth, it was just the bike officers. There was no tactical team, and all the bike officers were doing was helping the protesters get throughout downtown, blocking off intersections as needed. So clearly, there's definitely an escalated police response tonight.
Mm-hmm. A second ago, perfect timing. The helicopter was pulling out, and you can see the Trinity Trail there underneath. Some people have gathered. Okay, and this is more of the West 7th Entertainment District. This is a really popular area, and from this shot, you can see that it looks like Fort Worth police have blocked off at least the length of that block from the bridge and back. So clearly it looks like they're trying to keep folks from getting into an area that is pretty populated with businesses. And Tanya, I know we have a curfew for Dallas, but none that I'm aware of for Fort Worth. And you see people are out and about, so it looks like they're trying to control some of the crowd here, whether they're involved in the demonstration or not.
Right. As I looked online, I can't see that there's any kind of curfew for Fort Worth at this point. And this crowd looks peaceful. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no indication that that they're trying to push through the line or anything like that. It's just right. That clear that from what I'm just looking at visually from the helicopter, it looks like the protesters are there, the police are there, and they're sort of at a standoff is the best way I could describe it. Mm-hmm. A peaceful standoff. But you can tell that the police are making it, by all appearances, very clear that they're not going to let them cross that bridge into this area. And I don't know how far in the police memorial is, but again, there's a police memorial down there. There's the cultural district. Our offices are actually, our Fort Worth mm-hmm. offices are kind of down in that area. This is a kind of cultural district, entertainment area. There's a Target. There's a lot of stuff down there. So police are, just clearly not letting them pass, not letting them cross that bridge.
Okay, now we're getting a farther out look so we can see several, looks like several city blocks there are blocked off by Fort Worth police, just sort of hoping to control that situation. But again, it does look peaceful, other than the fact that they have closed down the West 7th Bridge. We're taking a wide look over Fort Worth now. And Tanya, if I can, I want to take a step back because we have seen, obviously, the situations with the demonstrations, not only in Fort Worth, but in Dallas. If you could, because I know you're very well sourced within the law enforcement community, can you speak to what you are hearing from the officers about the environment, the energy, the emotions as they see it from their perspective?
There's clearly a different sense about what's been happening over the last couple of days. Look, I've covered many protests over the last few years. By and large, protests in Dallas are very peaceful. Even on the night when we had, the awful incident where 5 officers were killed, that was a peaceful protest. That was one lone individual who decided to come there and do something awful. But the protest itself was peaceful. And so over the last couple of days, we've seen something very different. And I also think that based on what I've seen is that by and large, the people that were coming out to protest in Dallas were peaceful. Mm-hmm. You had small elements of people, small groups of people who clearly had come there for some other reason, to be engaged in looting or damaging property. There was other elements there beyond just a normal protest. And so that's what police have been grappling with, not only in Dallas, but around the nation. And Dallas took a fairly hands-off approach initially. I mean, I know they used tear gas that first night, mm-hmm. which, by the way, is very unusual. I mean, I've not known them to do that. Dallas police are very experienced with protests. So the fact that they even used tear gas that first night tells me something. It tells me how serious that situation was. But they still weren't making arrests.
Sure.
They were opting for discretion, trying to disperse the crowds. But overnight and over the last couple of nights, as we've seen, damage to property and just it looks like kind of small groups of people engaged in these activities. And that's why I really want to make this distinction between protesters, because I think that, it's our American right to protest.
Of course.
And folks have every right to protest. They have every right to be angry about what happened in Minneapolis. So, I think that it's important to make the distinction between the people that came out to protest and these other groups of people who have come out to engage in criminal activity. And so we saw DPD put in place this curfew, or the city of Dallas put in place this curfew. And we saw a video earlier. Police are taking this very seriously. I was watching as officers are taking people into custody in Dallas, and they're acting because, they believe that there will be more chaos and destruction tonight if they don't.
Right. I want to remind everybody, if you're just joining us, you are looking live at our helicopter over Fort Worth tonight of protesters on the 7th Street Bridge. One of those officers has turned on the lights on their car, so we're getting a better view of that line of officers who are on bikes, those officers standing behind them, and then the demonstrators, protesters on the top of your screen, many of them holding signs. Traffic is blocked on this bridge for several blocks in either direction. So there's a wide area here. There's no threat of traffic in that immediate area on the bridge. Obviously, if you're driving in this area, you're going to have to take a different way, but this is the situation in Fort Worth. We are also talking about Dallas, which has continued to see demonstrations today. And Tanya, I do want to echo what you were saying. On the Dallas side, I know officials have been talking, saying that there's really three types of people that they have seen out. It's the peaceful protesters that have every right to be doing what they're doing. They have people that are out there looking to cause damage and loot. And then there's this other group of people that might just be out to see what's happening, want to see it for themselves, want to get out of the house. Maybe they've been quarantined with COVID-19 for so long, they want to see what's happening. And all of those things are coming together in a tricky situation for people that do want to peacefully share how they're feeling about the death of George Floyd, and those who are really out there looking to possibly damage businesses or express their anger through the looting. Tanya, I'm curious, I'm watching these Fort Worth officers pulling up. I'm assuming they're just sort of fortifying this barrier they have here on the West 7th Bridge. I also want to mention, too, we talked about how no curfew in effect in the Fort Worth area, but there is a curfew in effect. It started at 7 o'clock tonight in Dallas. That's running through 6 a.m. It does not cover the entire city, though. It only affects the downtown area, specifically Deep Ellum, the Cedars neighborhood, the Central Business District, Victory Park, and also Uptown. Tanya, you are looking at this live feed from Fort Worth, correct?
Right. And, one thing I just noticed is you're seeing the people, looks like they're either got candles or
maybe
flashlights. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Phones, maybe phones. Yeah. Yeah, phones. That makes more sense. So, it's kind of, this has a very peaceful feel to it. I mean, this is not, and I can't say enough that this is people's American right. I mean, what we're seeing right now, this is what is, this is the way to express this anger and this frustration and this pain about this situation. I watched that video in Minneapolis, and I've made an effort to go watch every video of it I can find, and it's one of the most appalling things I've ever seen. And I've seen a lot of appalling things in my career. But I think it's really important to know, and we talked about this earlier, that that particular type of tactic, chokeholds, neck restraints, that stuff's been outlawed or basically against policy. Not even officers are not allowed to use it in Dallas for at least 16 years. It's something that when Police Chief David Kunkel, when he became chief back in 2004, we'd had a number of chokehold deaths. It was a huge issue back at the time. Back then I was at the Dallas Morning News, and he came in, and I mean, believe me, he got a lot of pushback from officers who were upset, but he said, no, we're not doing this anymore. And he got rid of it. It was called the LVNR, lateral vascular neck restraint. Wow, and he got rid of it. And again, a lot of pushback from police officers, but he said, we're not going to do this anymore. And officers in Dallas, I'm not sure about Fort Worth, but in Dallas are trained not to do anything in that sort of red zone, your neck, your trachea. And I think it's also really important to note that there has been a lot of change in Dallas in particular. We have seen police officers prosecuted in Dallas County. We saw the Balch Springs officer who went to prison for killing the young teenager, firing into that car, Amber Geiger, and the Botham Jean case. Of course, we've got an officer in Fort Worth who's been indicted. And you have, at least in the district attorney, John Creuzot, a very progressive stance. So this is I think a city and a county in Dallas that has made tremendous strides. So I think we can't lose sight of the progress that has been made in Dallas County in particular. I'll be honest with you, I don't know as much about Fort Worth because I've rarely been on the Dallas side. And so, I mean, I'm not saying that there's not additional changes that can't be made.
Sure.
I know they in Dallas they've added a new police monitor, and so there has been an effort to make additional changes. I don't think anybody, progress can always be made, but I don't think we should lose sight of the things that have already occurred.
Right. I do want to, Tanya, if I can, I want to welcome everybody who might be joining our feed now. You are looking live over Fort Worth. This is the 7th Street Bridge where people have gathered tonight. You see them holding signs on the top of your screen. They are blocking traffic, police blocking several city blocks around them to keep these protesters safe as they make their voices heard regarding their feelings of the death of George Floyd tonight in Fort Worth. Our helicopter has been watching the scene, and for the last, more time than you and I, Tanya, have been talking. This has been incredibly peaceful. When you zoom out, you can see that there's some people watching the scene, but so far there's not been, truly hardly any movement, and this has been a peaceful protest. Tanya, I wanted to ask you for some perspective here as we're over Fort Worth. Did the response that we're seeing from many different police departments speaking about George Floyd, did that and the way he died, did that surprise you? Because I know in the time that you've covered issues with police, I'll just say, it's not often that departments speak out about situations with other departments. Is that true?
I think that's generally true. I think that the situation with George Floyd was so appalling. I don't know of one police officer who made any excuses for it. It was, without a doubt, one of the most difficult things I've ever seen. And I know of many police officers who were very upset by what they saw. There were, a lot of police chiefs, a lot of police commanders spoke out on this. And that's progress, Marie. I know when I started covering policing 25 years ago, the thin blue line was a real thing. Police officers didn't speak out against other police officers. It just didn't happen back then. And I do believe that video has made a huge difference. There's just a lot of things whether it's body cams, cell phones, all these things. If you think about it, the George Floyd situation, what if that had happened 15 years ago? Mm-hmm. We're not going to have surveillance video. We're certainly not going to have cell phone video, most likely. So, we're in a changed world, and cameras have made a huge difference in what people see. So
Sure.
I think that there's a real difference in law enforcement and both in technology too.
Tanya, I want to ask, I can't remember, and I know we all both work in Dallas and Fort Worth, but I'm not sure if you covered at all Tatiana Jefferson's death in Fort Worth. This is somebody who has had such an impact, and I know has been on the hearts of a lot of these protesters and demonstrators in the Fort Worth area specifically. If you'll remember, she was home late at night. This was, I'm double checking my date here. I need to get
I believe it was October.
October,
I looked
thank
at
you.
it the other day. It was in October, and Tatiana Jefferson, the police officer, Aaron Dean. Mm-hmm. I actually went back and reread this the other day, and I covered some of it. He had gotten called out on a welfare check. A neighbor had seen a door open,
right,
and he gets there. It's dark, and he begins moving around the house, and he says, that he saw something in the window mm-hmm. and opened fire. I will tell you that when that happened, I also didn't have any police officers that I know of that defended that either. A lot of them called me and said, you don't fire into a house when you don't know you don't know who you're shooting at. And in this particular case, he was shooting at the homeowner.
Right, and this was a welfare check. That was also another point that was brought up.
It's a welfare check. Right, it was a non-emergency call. He could have backed up. There was a lot of things he could have done, and it was really heartbreaking. And I had covered the Amber Guyger trial. I mean, the Amber Guyger trial had ended at the end of September, and I remember I probably remarked to you or somebody else, well, something like that could never happen again, right? And then we had the Tatiana Jefferson case, and I realized there are differences between the Amber Guyger case and Tatiana Jefferson, but they were both very emotional, very difficult, and clearly the community in Fort Worth, and I could tell when I was over there at the protest on Friday that people are still really hurt by that, it was and that case has not gone to trial. It remains to be seen what's going to happen.
Right, Aaron Dean was indicted on murder in December of last December. So waiting to hear more on that. Another name, Tanya, I don't know if you were involved with this at all, but the Jacqueline Craig situation, that was something else that really gripped Fort Worth for so long in 2016 when she was arrested in a situation where she called for help in her Fort Worth neighborhood.
Yeah, I covered some of that. I wouldn't consider myself have been one of the main reporters. Again, my career's primarily been in Dallas, but yeah, I covered some of it, and I mean that was the video of that was also a pretty awful situation. She had called the police on this neighbor who she felt was I can't remember exactly what happened with her child, and instead the officer turns on her, and it was very the behavior, the way the police officer treated her was very hard to watch. And it made people very angry. And so I think that clearly Fort Worth has some, work to do in this area in terms of police community relations. And I think what we're seeing tonight on that bridge is not just about George Floyd. It's about all these situations. And I think it's so important. I'm looking at this, and this is a peaceful protest. People are making their voices heard in what we're looking at right here on this screen.
I also wanted to note, Tanya, that after the Jacqueline Craig incident, Fort Worth in 2017, that's when they started the Race and Culture Task Force. And that really came out of that situation where the city recognized that there needed to be some more conversation and discussion over issues of criminal justice, health, housing, but also racial equity and bias in the city of Fort Worth. So it's interesting to, see a situation like Jacqueline Craig, see the creation of a task force, and then other unfortunate situations like the death of a Tatiana Jefferson happening. You're sort of just seeing these different instances that really add to, I can't think of how else to describe it, but just this layers of this onion of a lot of emotion that no doubt these demonstrators are feeling out there tonight, wanting to be on this bridge and wanting to make their voices heard.
Well, and you cannot separate yourself from the history of this country.
Of course.
And the history of this country, there are a lot of things that are difficult to understand, and to just wrap your mind around. And so there are many people in the Black community that were alive during Jim Crow that remember these things. Mm-hmm. And so you can't just separate yourself and pretend like these things didn't happen. They did happen, and people have memories of them. They are still fresh in many ways, and we have to acknowledge them. We have to deal with them. You don't change things by ignoring them. You have to deal with them.
Sure. Tanya, if I can ask you, as we're sort of looking at the setup of these officers, because of your knowledge of policing, can you speak at all to the training that these officers undergo for situations like this, be it protecting the rights of protesters or just large crowds like this? Any context about sort of what some of the priorities might be in a situation like this?
Well, I know when I reached out to Fort Worth on Friday, I asked them, kind of how they were going to be handling Friday's protest. And what they told me was, they said, well, the bike officers would be out there and that they would be talking to the protest leaders and letting them know that they were there to ensure that their First Amendment rights were protected, mm-hmm. Their right to protest, but also their right to be protected from someone who might want to prevent them from protesting. Because we have seen around the nation cars driving into protesters and that sort of thing. Obviously, we have what happened in Charlottesville a few years ago. So, I will tell you that in watching these bike officers on Friday, I was very impressed by them. Mm-hmm. They at quite a bit they were being taunted and things said to them that would have been difficult to take. And they took it, and they did their jobs, and they did it very professionally. But, you can see, like I said, you see the line of the bike officers, and then behind them, clearly that's going to be your tactical officers. And tactical officers will be very highly trained. These are going to be your SWAT team folks who are, but you can see they're behind the bike officers, right? I mean, they're falling back, and nobody's pushing. It's just, I have to wonder, be honest with you, how long is this going to last? I mean, this has been going on for at least a couple hours.
Sure.
But nobody seems to be losing patience, and I don't know. But it's also clear that the police are not going to let them push forward.
Right. So we haven't seen any movement. Yeah.
At some point, either the crowd is going to disperse, mm-hmm. or the bike officers. Or at some point, we may see the police start to push the crowd back.
Okay.
And the question is, when is that going to happen?
Sure.
And it's 9:13. Mm-hmm. The other night when I was covering the protest in Fort Worth, it ended at, right at 9:53. Mm-hmm. It was right before it all ended. But they on Friday they did loops around downtown. They went down and came back up around Sundance Square and all that, and it probably 4 or 5, maybe 4 times. Mm-hmm. So they have obviously taken a different route tonight.
Sure.
So.
Okay, Tanya, as you're looking at our feed, we have left Fort Worth, and this helicopter is now heading back to Dallas. So we will look, if we can, for a few moments at the scene there. So once I get a bit more information about exactly what we're looking at, I will tell you. But Tanya, I wanted to, just since we've been keeping an eye on things in Dallas, at least I have, working in this city today, over here, I wanted to give you a glimpse of what we've been seeing. So earlier today, there were several peaceful protests. There was a very large prayer outside of DPD headquarters today. Our Teresa Woodard was there. She'll be bringing us some images from that tonight at 10 o'clock. Something else to be aware of is we did start digging into some of the protesters that were arrested overnight into this morning. And our Jason Whiteley is looking at who these people are, their motivations, in some cases their locations. So if you're wondering who are the people that are being picked up, who are the so-called troublemakers, or at least in police minds, of these protests and demonstrations, lootings, etc. We're going to try to peel back a little bit of that tonight in our piece at 10 o'clock. But while things have been somewhat peaceful today, we still have had some people that were detained once the curfew went into effect at 7 o'clock tonight. We saw that. So we're looking to get some more information from Dallas Police as to their response this evening when it comes to making sure that people are off the streets. On a personal note, I did go out after our newscast and did some quick surveillance of my own around downtown Dallas. And we saw several very large trucks or just a couple of squad cars and cones out. I mean, officers are blocking just about every entrance into downtown from 35 into downtown Dallas. They're also shutting down several streets. It feels like they are having more of a presence there tonight, and that's certainly something we are going to keep an eye on. Tanya, thank you for being with us and giving us your perspective and valuable insight from your many years covering policing. We appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Marie. You have a good night.
And thank you all for watching. Join us for much more on today's protests tonight in our news at 10 o'clock.